Shilian's head shot up. The human faces churning within the black clouds began to riot, and they plunged to earth like black shooting stars, dragging long tails behind them. The plague of human face disease was descending. The crowd was terrified and lost all sense. Some bolted, some retreated inside houses to hide, and there were also a few who went to grab for the black sword that had been knocked to the ground earlier. But they came up empty, as at some point it had gone missing. Shilian had been too shocked by the people's reactions to notice this until now. "Where's the sword? Who took it?" No one had time to answer, for they were fleeing in all directions. But how could they possibly be faster than the falling vengeful spirits? The wails and screams of the living and the howls of the vengeful dead erupted from all directions. Once the vengeful spirits had caught up to the living, they became like roiling, thick, black smoke, unrelenting and clinging as they burrowed into every pore and slowly melded into people's bodies. Shilian fought arduously to drive them out. But alas, there were too many, and he couldn't manage it alone. He helplessly watched countless people wail and howl as the ghosts chased them down, the water merchant and his wife, the chubby chef. They all rolled on the ground, wrestling with the tangled black smoke. The whole while, White No-Face stood close by, watching everything and jeering. Gripped by anxiety and fury, Shilian steeled his mind and roared at the spot where with vengeful spirits. "Hey!" He caught the creature's attention easily. He was the mastermind behind their awakening, after all. Shilian opened his arms wide. "Come to me!" The vengeful spirits that had already tangled up living victims hesitated, undecided on whether they should go. But the vengeful spirits still in the air instantly changed course and hurtled straight for Shilian. Success! Shilian's heart was beating so fast it was going to seize and stop. He didn't know what would happen, or what would become of him, but fueled by the hot blood rushing to his head, he was going to give this everything he had, even if he could only hope to prove his point, while the vile monster watched him be beaten black and blue. He would still never back down, even if another 100,000 souls of the dead were to come. He would still be invincible. You want to see me feel sorry for myself and self-destruct? Well, I won't. I will never. Wave upon wave of the black tide that drowned the heavens and earth surrounded Shilian, and a vengeful spirit wailed as it passed through his body. It felt like Shilian's heart had frozen in an instant, and he shuddered. Soon after, a second one came. Then a third. The creatures sliced through him like sharp blades as they penetrated his body. Each time they took away a sliver of whatever warmth Shilian still had left. His face grew paler and paler. Nevertheless, he remained firm and did not back down. He had only been touched by a few hundred, and he had only stood his ground for a short time. There would be many more to come, and they were the black clouds that blanketed the sky. Shilian closed his eyes, gathering his strength to endure the flaming fury of all the vengeful spirits. Yet unexpectedly, the next attack never came. Confused, he opened his eyes, and to his surprise, the black tide surrounding him had vanished. It had transformed into a rolling black current, which was now flowing away from him. Stunned, Shilian turned to look. At the end of the long street, there stood a black-clad warrior who gripped a long, black sword. Wuming. Shilian had ordered him to leave the area while he activated the plague of human face disease. Why was he here now? Shilian had no idea what Wuming was doing here, but he was only stunned for a moment before he charged toward him. "Wait! What are you doing? Don't touch that! Give me back the sword!" Wuming seemed to have heard his voice and looked up. Shilian couldn't see his real face. He only saw that mask with its drawn-on smile. But Shilian had a strange feeling that beneath his mask, Wuming was really smiling. The feeling was fleeting, however. The vast black torrent and the screaming tide gathered to form a tempest, and it swallowed Wuming whole in an instant. And in that instant, Shilian heard a heart-wrenching, blood-curdling scream. Image. He thought he had heard that voice somewhere before. No. He knew he had heard that voice somewhere before. Pain. It hurt like he was feeling the same agony. It hurt like a fate worse than death. It hurt so much that his mind and body were being torn apart. It hurt so much, he thudded to his knees, hugging his head as he screamed along too. "Ah!" The explosion of excruciating pain in his heart came suddenly and left equally fast. And after some unknown time had passed, silence slowly descended upon the area. Shilian gradually dropped the hands that hugged his head. Dazed, he looked up and scanned around him. The ground was covered with people, most of them unconscious, but all the vengeful spirits entangling them had vanished. The scene confused him. What happened to the plague of human face disease? What happened to the vengeful spirits? What happened to him? There was no trace of the black torrent. The only thing that remained where the black-clad, nameless ghost had once stood was the black sword, which had fallen to the ground. Beside the point of the fallen blade, there was a tiny white flower. Shilian staggered to his feet and walked over, picking up the flower and the sword. He felt his face, looked at his arms. Nothing on his body seemed different. There was nothing to indicate he'd taken on some powerful curse. As he stood there, mystified, he heard a voice behind him. It said softly, "Ah." Shilian turned around. White No-Face was standing behind him, his arms crossed and tucked into his expansive sleeves, which fluttered in the wind. Shilian hadn't yet processed what had happened, but he felt a vague sense of foreboding. White No-Face glanced at him and started chuckling. The sense of foreboding was growing stronger, and Shilian knitted his brows. "What are you laughing about?" Instead of answering, White No-Face asked him, "You still don't understand what happened?" "What?" Shilian asked. "Do you know who that ghost was?" White No-Face asked. A soul of someone who died on the battlefield?" Shilian tried. "Yes," White No-Face replied. "But he was also your very last believer in the world. And now he's no more." Believer? He still had a believer in this world? It was a long moment before Shilian could squeeze out a few choked words. "What do you mean, no more?" "His soul has been dispersed," White No-Face replied languidly. Shilian had a hard time accepting this. "How did his soul just disperse?" "Because he was cursed on your behalf. The souls you summoned devoured him whole, leaving not a crumb behind," White No-Face said. Shilian couldn't manage a reply. The souls he summoned? Cursed on his behalf? "Oh, yes, that's right. This wasn't the first time you've met him," White No-Face continued. Shilian stared at him blankly. White No-Face seemed amused. "That ghost has been following you for a while. At first I thought he was simply deeply resentful, so I caught and interrogated him. His answers were quite interesting. The Zhongyong Festival, a night of lanterns, a wandering ghost fire. Do you remember? The Zhongyong Festival? Night of lanterns? Wandering ghost fire?" Shilian mumbled. "In life he was a soldier under your command," White No-Face lazily hinted. "In death his soul followed you. He died in battle for you, turned into a wrath ghost because you were pierced by 100 swords. And now his soul has been obliterated because you unleashed the plague of human face disease." Shilian seemed to vaguely recall something, but he hadn't even seen his believer's face. He didn't even know his name. What could he recall? How much could he really recall? "Perhaps your Highness has believers here who still offer worship." Yes, there was a believer, and he had been the one and only. White No-Face was still speaking, going on and on about many things, but Shilian was lost in a daze and took none of it in. Finally, White No-Face concluded, "A god like you is both sad and laughable, and he's even more sad and laughable to have believed in you." When White No-Face had mocked him earlier, Shilian hadn't reacted, but when he heard this creature insult his believer so condescendingly, it was like Shilian was jolted awake by the stab of a sword. An uncontrollable rage roiled up from within him, and he charged at White No-Face. The creature easily seized him. "You can't win against me like this. How many times must I tell you before you see the truth?" White No-Face said coldly. Shilian hadn't wanted to win against him in the first place, and it didn't matter if he couldn't. He simply wanted to beat the creature to a pulp. "What do you know? How dare you mock him?" he cried angrily. "That was his last believer in this world." "Of course I dare to mock the follower of a failure," White No-Face replied. "You were a fool, and your believer is even more of a fool. Listen, if you wish to defeat me, then you must obey my teachings. Otherwise, you can never dream of winning against me. Shilian wanted to spit at him with everything he had, but even breathing was difficult. White No Face opened his hand with a flourish, and another Cry Smiling mask appeared in his palm. Now, let us start over. As he was about to press the mask onto Shilian's face, there came a sudden, loud rumbling. Lightning flashed, and thunder roared on the horizon, and a mysterious light shot from within the clouds. White No Face stopped in alarm. What is this? A heavenly tribulation? After a pause, he dismissed that statement. No, that's not it. That wasn't it. It was a heavenly tribulation, but that wasn't all. A man's deep voice resounded across the entire sky. If he cannot win against you, what about me? Shilian's head shot up. A martial god had appeared at the end of the long street. He was clad in white armor and brimmed with a propitious aura. A thin sheen of white spiritual light enveloped his body, and he walked toward them step by step with a sword in hand, carving out a path of light in this gloomy, dark world. Shilian's eyes grew wide. Junwoo. After the rain had ceased and the skies had cleared, Shilian sat on the burnt earth, panting lightly. Junwoo sheathed his sword and walked over. Shenle, welcome back to the ranks. He wore a tired expression, traces of blood still on his face from the wounds inflicted by White No Face. Junwoo was covered in injuries, large and small. They were serious, but White No Face's wounds were far more so. His body had been ripped apart and his form had been dispersed, leaving behind only a shattered Cry Smiling mask. When he heard him say back to the ranks, Shilian blinked. He touched his neck, and only then did he notice the cursed shackle was gone. Junwoo smiled. As expected. I was not mistaken. It took you even less time to return than I anticipated. Shilian slowly regained himself. He flashed a small smile in return, but his was a bitter one. After catching his breath, he spoke up. My lord, I want to beg something of you. Permitted, Junwoo said. Are you not going to ask what it is first? Shilian asked. Since you would be asking for a gift upon returning to the heavenly court regardless, let today's incident serve as my gift to you for returning to the ranks. The corners of Shilian's lips tugged, and he rose to his feet. He looked Junwoo squarely in the eyes, and said with the utmost respect, Pray my lord banish me to the mortal realm once more. Hearing this, Junwoo's smile faded. Why ever for? I've done wrong. Shilian explained the honest truth. I was the one who unleashed the second plague of human face disease, even though the consequences weren't as severe as the first. This time, the only casualty was a nameless ghost, and perhaps no one in the world had cared for him. In the end, the consequences of this second plague weren't nearly as severe. If you knew it was wrong, then you are already in the right, Junwoo said slowly. However, Shilian shook his head. Just knowing it is not enough. If I make a mistake, I should be the one punished. But I committed the wrong, and the one who took the punishment for me was... He trailed off, then raised his head once more. So as punishment, I pray my lord will grant me a cursed shackle. No, 2 cursed shackles. One to seal away my spiritual powers, another to disperse all my luck and fortune. Junwoo frowned slightly. Disperse all your luck and fortune? Will that not make you unlucky beyond belief? Truly make you a god of misfortune? Shilian had resented being called a god of misfortune. He was repulsed by the very idea and considered it a great humiliation. However, he no longer cared about things like that. If I am to become a god of misfortune, then so be it, as long as I know deep down that I'm not. Once his fortune was dispersed, it would naturally flow to the less fortunate. It would be a form of atonement. It will be very embarrassing, Junwoo reminded him. It doesn't matter, Shilian said, and to be honest, it feels like I'm almost used to it by now. It wasn't something he'd wanted to get used to, but once he did, it really felt like nothing could harm him. Junwoo watched him. Shenle, you have to understand that you will no longer be a god if you have no spiritual power. Shilian sighed. My lord, I know that better than anyone. After a pause, he said in a tone that was a little frustrated and a little forlorn. People say I'm a god, and so I have spiritual powers. But in truth, I'm not the god they thought I was, and I might not be as invincible as they hoped. Would a real god be such a failure? I wanted to protect my people, but I let their corpses spread across the land. I wished to avenge them, but the very last minute I abandoned the plot. White No-Face wasn't wrong about me being a failure. If I'm no longer a god, then so be it. Junwoo gazed at him intently, and after a long while he said, Shenla has grown up. That should have been something Shilian heard from his elders. Unfortunately, his father and mother had no more chances to say it. A moment later, Junwoo continued, Since this is the path you have chosen, I will do as you ask. However, I will need a reason to banish you to the mortal realm. He couldn't just casually banish a heavenly official like this was a child's game. Otherwise, how would the world see the heavens? But Shilian had an idea. My lord, I don't believe we've ever sparred with everything we've got. Junwoo understood what he meant and smiled. Shenla, I am injured. Me too, Shilian said. So we're even. Junwoo nodded. If that is the case, then I will not hold back. Shilian smiled, his eyes brightening with excitement at the prospect. I won't either. His Highness the Crown Prince was banished again. After his smashing and grandiose second heavenly tribulation, the Crown Prince of Shenla rampaged across the heavens with fierce belligerence. Before even one instant's time had passed, he was knocked down below once more by the Heavenly Emperor. None of the heavenly officials could figure out what the man was thinking. But Shilian couldn't figure out what the other heavenly officials were thinking either. Were they really that curious what he was up to, watching him day after day, disguising themselves as mortals to watch him, disguising themselves as animals to watch him? They had been stalking him for days. Was a grown man laying bricks really that interesting? As he wondered about this, the foreman behind him began to shout, Newbie! Yes you, I'm talking to you! Get back to work! Stop being lazy! Shilian hastily sat up with a loud, Oh! And then, he picked up a ragged cattail fan and started fanning the flames in front of him. He was seated in front of a small stove, stacked on several bricks, and upon the stove was a large pot of rice that bubbled as it cooked. This was a construction site, where he was paid to haul earth and mud. However, the bricks had already been transported, so Shilian's task for the moment was cooking. He cooked, and as he worked, 2 carriages approached, hauling 2 very large divine statues for the 2 newly built temples nearby. Shilian absent-mindedly tossed whatever was at hand into the pot, stealing glances at the statues as he did. The 2 divine statues were carried into their respective temples. From within the hall of the temple on the left, he heard cheers. General Xuanzhen is great! General Xuanzhen is generous and kind! Shilian was speechless, using generous and kind to praise Mulching. Were those devotees serious? But they apparently had their reasons. After all, everyone knew that Mulching had ascended because he had cleared away the vengeful spirits that stubbornly tarried around the old capital of Qianle. Calling that generous and kind wasn't unreasonable. In any case, everyone in the old capital of Qianle was very grateful for him. From within the hall of the temple to the left, he heard roars from another set of devotees, who refused to be beaten by those of the left temple. General Zhuyang is great! General Zhuyang is brave and mighty! Shilian nodded. To this he had no objections, although that praise might not hold true in the face of women. The devotees on both sides were screaming with all their might, doing all they could to be louder than each other, until Shilian's ears ached. He sighed and rubbed his forehead as he thought, Why must they be like this? If they hated each other so much, wouldn't their problems be solved by not building building temples right next to each other? The answer to that was, of course not. This area was a bustling domain with excellent feng shui, and the devotees of those 2 heavenly officials would never abandon such tempting lands solely for the sake of avoiding each other. They had to do all they could to steal each other's worshippers and disgust one another. It didn't take long before the devotees from both sides progressed from yelling to fighting. Over by the stove, Shilian determined that the time was about right, so he started banging the pot cover with a spatula and called out loudly, Everyone stop fighting! Come eat! It was the height of the brawl, so who would bother listening to him? Shilian shook his head and opened the pot cover, and the fragrance wafted 10 miles around. Now he'd done it. The brawl instantly stopped, and everyone started howling. What the fuck? What's that smell? Who's cooking shit? Not just shit. Shit that smells like pot bottoms. What? This is a hidden, treasured royal recipe, Shilian began to argue back. The foreman approached with his hand covering his nose, his face green, and he exclaimed as he jumped in anger, "Bullshit! What hidden treasured recipe? Who's royalty? You? Get the hell out of here, that's disgusting!" "All right, fine, I'll go," Shilian agreed. "But will you please give me my pay first?" "You dare to even mention pay?" the foreman exclaimed angrily. "Why don't you tell me this? Ever since you came, how much have I lost in damages, huh? When it rains, lightning strikes, aimed right for you. Houses have caught on fire 3 times, and collapsed 3 times too. You're like a god of misfortune, and you dare ask me for pay? Get out of here, come back again and I'll beat you up." "Hey, that doesn't work," Shilian said. "You just said all those things were coming especially for me, so that means nothing happened to anyone else. I think you just want to get out of paying your bill." Before he could finish, the foreman and the other laborers couldn't take the smell wafting out of the pot anymore. They all fled the area, leaving Shilian in the dust. "Wait!" Shilian called out. He glanced around and saw that all the brawlers had also been chased away by the stench. Shilian was speechless. "If you weren't going to eat it, why make me cook such a large pot? Don't waste it just because you've got money," he mumbled to himself. Shaking his head, Shilian contemplated for a moment, then ladled out 2 large bowls of rice. He offered one at the temple of Duyang, and the other at the temple of Xuanzhen. Feeling that he'd made the best use of everything, he clapped his hands together, completely satisfied. He went back outside to pack up his stuff. He rolled up the straw mat on the ground very seriously, and tied it to his sword, before strapping both to his back. The white silk band wrapped around his wrist nuzzled him furtively, and Shilian patted it before riding the bamboo hat on his head. "Fine, don't pay. I'll go busking." He still had his specialty trick, after all, shattering boulders on his chest. As he walked, Shilian suddenly noticed a tiny red flower on the side of the road, which looked absolutely precious. He crouched to gently touch its petals, feeling quite cheerful. "I hope we shall meet again," he said to it. Even after he had disappeared into the distance, the tiny red flower still danced in the wind. Picture. And that is the end of Arc 4, and also Volume 6.